Hello, everyone, and welcome to using BI tools to create dashboards, KPIs, and analytics. My name is Tyson Harris, and I'm joined by our presenter today, senior consultant with our professional services group, Dan Ellis. Dan started his career 30 years ago as a graduate developer at one of the largest Synergy DE software houses in Europe and quickly specialized in some of the more technical aspects of Synergy development. Dan's always worked very closely with Synergex, being a member of the Synergy Technical Advisory Council since its inception. And Dan is also has extensive expertise in open VMS systems. Since joining Synergex as a PSG consultant, Dan has worked as a business analyst and senior developer on large ERP projects. Other engagements include helping several customers implement synergy replication and working with business intelligence tools to analyze and visualize the replicated data. So we're going to get started here with Dan's presentation in just a moment. I just wanted to remind everyone that there's going to be a little time for Q&A after the presentation with an opportunity to use your mics if you'd like. So in the meantime, you can post your questions to the Q&A chat box or the regular chat area, and we'll address them after the presentation. If you have any technical issues during this presentation or any time during the conference, please contact classes@synergex.com and we'll be able to help you out. We'll go ahead and put that email in the chat as well for your future reference. And as a last reminder, this session is being recorded. So without further ado, let's kick off Dan's presentation.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dan Ellis, a solutions architect with the Professional Services Group here at Synergex. I'm going to talk today about using business intelligence tools to create dashboards, key performance indicators, and analytics, specifically in conjunction with some of the tools that Synergex produces, such as Harmony Core. There are lots of business intelligence products out on the marketplace, and they're available to suit most budgets, including usually a starter free option, with additional services depending on the connections that you may want to use or how you'd want to deploy. So some of the popular ones out there are Power BI from Microsoft, ClickView, and Tableau. Another advantage of using a BI tool is that they can consolidate data sources from a number of different places. So they can take relational database feeds, they can take delimited files, CSV, tab delimited, they can take web feeds such as SAP, JSON, and in our instance, OData information from Harmony Core. Now we have lots of customers that are already using business intelligence tools, but they're mostly using them with batch data. So once the report is run, once the data is imported, it's then old already. So we're going to look today at actually live querying data from a Harmony Core data source. And we're going to focus on the product called Microsoft Power BI. So why use Power BI? Well, one of the main reasons is there's lots of training material available online. I learned how to use it watching YouTube videos. There's lots of content in MSDN and plenty of blog posts to Google for when you can't find the information that you need. Another good reason for using Power BI is it starts with a free option using the Power BI desktop tool, which I'm going to demonstrate in a moment. And there are low-cost deployment options by using Power BI Pro, which is $10 a month per user. So it integrates and runs natively in Azure if required, and it can be embedded into other dashboards. So some of the Azure dashboards, you can embed Power BI information. It also integrates into all of the other Microsoft products. So any of your reports you can output to Teams, SharePoint, you can extract it as an Excel file, make a PowerPoint out of it. And one of the other main reasons as well is it has a first-class OData client. So as you know, Harmony Core uses the OData protocol and it is built into Power BI. You don't have to go through third-party adapters. For instance, if you was using Tableau, you may need to use a third-party adapter from a company called CData. Microsoft are regularly adding new features to it and lots of new graphics. It also has a mobile client, so there is an Android and Apple client for it, which will responsibly display the visuals that you make. One of the nice things about that as well is you don't have to worry about security for mobile devices. It's all baked into the app. And as I mentioned earlier, it has really good support for raw data. One of the other nice things about Power BI as well is that support can be extended by using Power Query. Power Query is another product from Microsoft that's embedded into lots of its products like Office. You can use it in Excel, and it's a query-like language, which I'll also demonstrate in the demo as well. So one thing to note, if you are using large data sets, I would consider using Synergy ISAM replication. If you've got a history file with like 100 million records, if you do a refresh of that for your dashboard, obviously it will go off to your production server and read 100 million records over the wire, so that could slow your production server. So for very large data sets, I would recommend using Synergy ISAM replication and getting it from the database. It'd be much faster, much more efficient, and you won't have to worry about affecting performance in production. And as I also mentioned earlier, which I'll demonstrate, is you can have the ability to mix with other data sources. So I'll show you getting data from Excel, but you can mix it in from other products that you use as well. So without further ado, let's go on to the demo. So we'll start off from the Power BI desktop. This is a Windows program, it's a free download. Just go to powerbi.microsoft.com and to get it. And the first thing we're going to need to do is we need to get some data. So if we go to the get data, you can directly pick up an OData feed. However, the OData feed that we've got in our Harmony Core API needs authentication via bearer token, and that isn't an authentication protocol that Power BI supports. It will support OAuth 2 and things like that. So if you've got newer authentication built into your Harmony Core API, you'll be able to pick it directly off the data feed. But for our purposes, we'll use a blank query. And then we're going to use the Power Query editor to create that. Now you can go step by step if you want, but what we'll do is, well, I'll just paste it straight into the advanced editor and talk you through what we need to do. So if I go into here, paste that in. So basically it's like a little bit like a programming language, and we've got our username and password that we're going to use, and that's our JSON content that we're going to put into our request. This is the endpoint that we're going to be using, so it's the login endpoint. And then we're basically going to do a post to that endpoint, get back some JSON, and then pull out the token from that JSON that we've got back and use it as the bearer token in our OData feed. So if I do done with that, it will go off and it will go talk to the API and give us a list of tables that we want. So here's a list of all the tables in the API. So we're going to pick one called Offices down here. And there we go. So I can click that and off it will go and retrieve all of the offices into Power BI. There we go, and give us a preview of that. So what I can also do is change the properties of the query name. We'll call it Offices. I do close and apply, and that will then pull the data into our Power BI desktop. So everything's gone a little bit slow because of all the software running on my machine to do the screen recording. But if we go in Power BI, there's three different main sort of screens that you've got. The top one in here is the actual creation of the dashboards, which I'll show you in a moment. The middle one is the data, and then the bottom one is the relationships between all of the data. The top one is where you build your visuals. The second one is where you would look at all of the different data. So within here at the moment we've only got offices. If I click on offices, we can see all of the fields in the offices, and it does some parsing of that as well. So if it gives you totals of things, if it thinks it's something you need a total for. And then the bottom of here are the relationships, and we'll go into the relationships in a moment. We're bringing some more tables. So I'm just going to bring some more tables in, and we'll pause it here while I go and do all of that. So as you can see, I've now pulled in 4 tables: a table of addresses, sales, tours, and the names of the offices within those. So what I need to do now is I need to set up some relationships between the tables. Now, if your How Many Car API already has relationships defined, Power BI will know about them and will show you them in the relations. However, for this particular How Many Car API, we don't have relations, so we're going to set them up manually within Power BI. Once they are set up, they are stored, and if you reuse the data for anything else, you don't have to set it up again. And you can also have a hybrid approach. So if you already have relations in your How Many Core API, but you want to add some more, you can do that too. And one of the cool things as well is that in our case, the tours and the sales tables are actually, the key is multiple fields, and that's really easy to do. We can make a new column. So if you look in here in the tours table, I've made a new column called, I'll scroll all the way to the side, called lead key. If I click on lead key, it shows me what this is. It's actually the lead number and the lead address. You see up in here, it just adds these 2 fields together. And then again, I've done the same thing for the sales table. I've created a lead key within the sales table. So if I go over to the 3rd page within here, you can see I've created some other links. I've created a link between the office table. If we look at the properties there, you can see that the office code and the office ID are linked. It's a many-to-one relationship, and it only goes in a single direction. Click on this link as well, have a look at the properties. You will see that it's a many-to-many relationship in both directions. That tour keys in both tables are linked as a relationship. So we now have all the relationships set up to be able to start creating some reports. Okay, now we have the data and we have our relations, we can start making some dashboards and using some tiles. So the first one that we'll make is we'll make a simple chart. So a stacked column chart. All the graphics are here in the right hand side on this pane, and you can actually download more from the Power BI website. So what we'll do is we'll make a simple stack chart here on our x-axis. We'll put the office name, and then on our y-axis we'll put the number of sales that we've had for that particular for that particular office. So this gives us a nice sort of graphic showing that which office has done the most number of sales. Then what we can do is, if we want to, we can also add a filter to this page as well. So if we go into here and we pick this slicer here, we can drag that, pop that on here, and then we can, through the sales, we can add a date slicer in there. So now what we can do is we can add a filter to this table so we can slice it and dice it by different dates. So if we add a slicer to here, and then we need to decide how the slicer is going to work. So this is where we can introduce the concept of measures. So within the data, you can make special fields and do calculations on them or split them around. So if you look at this field that I've created here, year toured, it just takes the year part of the tour date, because we don't want to split it by each individual date. We're only interested in the years. So if I add this value into this slicer here, and we change the format to a slicer, and then we change it to a drop down. Now we don't, if we change it to a list, we'll now have all of the different years that we can select. So we can say, right, I want to look at that data by the year 2021. I want to look at that year, to have a look at the data for 2011. So we can slice it in a number of different ways. We can add a number of different slices to here. So we could add any kind of sort of sales categories and that kind of it to the slices. So we can also add some gauges to the report. So if we pick the gauge tile and drop it in here, and then we add this measure that we've made, which is the average price. If we look here, it's the sum of the sales value divided by the sales count to get the average price that somebody paid. We'll drop it onto this tile here again. Change it to a gauge. And there's our gauge graphic showing what the average price was. Now what we can also do is, if you look at the properties of this gauge, we can give it a minimum and maximum value and a target value. So within this data, we don't have a target value for the average price. So but what we can do is we can mix and match where we get our data from. So if we go in this data set, we don't have a target value for the average price, but we can mix and match data where we get it from. So in this instance, I've created an Excel spreadsheet with a value for the target price. So if we go into the Excel, select this Excel workbook that I created, which just has one field in it, one literal value, we can then pick in the total target value and load it, and then it will go off and pass the Excel spreadsheet, get that row in there, and on our right hand side with our data, we'll now see our total target data now with our column in there. So what we can do is we can add that column into our target data value here, and we've now got our target on our KPI. So just an example of some of the other types of reports that you can make. You can do things like pie chart with values, but one of the other key things that you can do is you can use location information to create map-based reports. So for this one, we're looking at the value of sales by location. So we can see here that for Texas, we've done $5 million worth of sales, and that's why it's the biggest blob. In New York, we've done $4 million worth of sales, but we can also link reports together as well. So within Texas, we could do drill through to details and then show details of all the individual transactions that are included in that report. And as you can see from the right hand side, there are lots and lots of different types of visuals and charts that you can make using Power BI. One of the other key things is that there is a mobile version of it, so you can publish these. There's an app that you can download for Android and for Apple that will display all these responsively on iPads, Android tablets, and all those kind of things. But you can also publish to the web. So if I go in here, File, Publish, I'm logged into my Power BI account, so I do Publish to Power BI. Into my workspace. It will go off and publish that. And as it also says here, is you can make different views for mobile devices and look to see what it looks like. So here we go. It's successfully done that. It'll take me straight into my browser. I need to authenticate as usual. And here we go with the browser-based version of this report. So pretty much exactly what we saw earlier. And again in here, I could do a drill through, look at all the details of the reports. As with everything, I can extract these to Excel. I can share them in Teams, export the data, print it, all that good stuff. and then my filters just as they are in the Power BI version of it. So that's a really, really quick run through of what Power BI can do and what it can do with Harmony Core API data.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Dan, for that very informative presentation. It's now time for the Q&A portion of the presentation here. So just as a quick reminder to everyone out there, there's a raise hand icon in the bottom right-hand side of the chat box if you'd like to get the attention of myself or Dan. If you don't see the icon at the bottom of the chat, you can click into the chat field and you guys can go ahead and fire off some questions if you have any about the presentation you just saw. It looks like we have a few trickling into the chat here, so I can read those here, and hopefully Dan can give us some of his insight. So Ridwan says, are there any built-in protection mechanisms in place to protect the operational DB against badly written queries if using the OData mechanism to access data directly off the operational DB?
There are some basic things written into Harmony Core, and Harmony Core will optimize things as much as possible, particularly if you're using XF Server. It will try only pull the data, the fields off that are selected in there. But that's why I mentioned if you want to use it with an absolutely huge data set, I think you'd probably be better off with using replicated ISAM data. What you can also do, you can use Power Query and things like that to aggregate the data before you push it into Power BI, but you're still going to be going against the entire data set. So yeah, you need to think about just the amount of data that you'll be dealing with.
Thank you for that question, Ridwan. Next up, we've got Chuck. He says, on the data side, are there any new DB targets for a section on the product roadmap? I replicate data to SQL Server and Oracle, but the ultimate target will eventually be Snowflake. For a lot of our apps, we'll be looking to create a direct feed to Snowflake rather than extracting the relational data using Informatica or another tool to S3 or Snowpipe.
Um, I'm not aware of any additional DB targets at the moment for SQL Connection. I think everybody knows that we use a third-party app from a company called Trifox. But what I would say is that I've done a SQL replication project for a very large global hotel chain where we replicated into event hubs in Azure, and all we are doing is passing JSON. We're just serializing ISAM data into JSON. So I think I don't know too much specifically about Snowflake, but I would imagine that it could use very similar code to the code that we did for that rather large hotel chain.
All right. Next, we've got a question from Scott. He says, when importing data, can you pick and choose which fields you need rather than all fields? If so, is there an advantage?
Yeah, absolutely. You can pick which fields you want to pull over wire, and there's less traffic over the wire. The way Power BI works by default is it will pull the data into a data set that sits in its Power BI service in Azure. And then when you want to refresh it, you'll hit refresh and it'll go off and get the latest data. So once it's in Azure, it's sort of that's when it does all of its analysis and aggregation and all that kind of stuff. So if you only pick the fields you need, then that's less data initially over the wire. So it's a definite advantage to doing that.
Thanks for your question, Scott. We've got a couple more here. Do you have to do everything in the cloud or can you run on premise?
You can run on premise. Microsoft have a service called the Power BI Gateway that runs on site. If you're not able to run in the cloud for a variety of reasons, you can use the Power BI Gateway to do it instead.
All right. And can you create traditional paginated reports for printing?
Um, with With the Power BI desktop that I just showed, no, not really. If you want to print or export, you would generally do it to PDF. It would show you what's on screen, or you could extract it to Excel. But Microsoft do have another product called um, Power BI Report Builder, where you can make traditional paginated reports. I haven't used it, but in doing my research, it looked very much like if anybody had ever used something like called Crystal Reports or something like that. Um, and you are able to print those in as well as print to PDF. You're able to print those in the traditional way. So in probably in the traditional way that Synergy programs print reports as well. So that looked quite. If you're looking to do as a replacement for some of your reports, that looked like quite a useful product to implement.
Excellent. I've got one more question here. If anyone else wants to get any of your last minute questions in, please do so. Please do so now. You can go ahead and put them again in the chat box or the Q&A section. Um, one more question: how can you deal with data changing in Harmony Core?
Well, because it's essentially JSON. If you have additional fields in your Harmony core, and you've done a regen, a recompile, Power BI just handles it. It just sees it as additional data and adds it. If you change any of the names of your fields, obviously you will then need to edit your reports and remove the field and add the new field. But in general, it does a really good job of handling changes to data.
Excellent. Does anyone else have any more questions for Dan here? I'll give you a few more moments to type something into the chat here. Otherwise, I think we'll be able to wrap up this session pretty soon.
I forgot to show the sort of the mobile side of things, but it does. It's probably not gonna, but it does look really good on things like iPads and on my phone as well. And it's fully functional. You can do all of your filtering and your exporting and things like that. Um, it's it's just a really cool product, and you can learn pretty much everything that you need to know from YouTube, because that's how I did it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for that session, Dan. I'm sure everyone in here got to learn something from this presentation. And thank you everyone out there in the audience for joining today. We'll see you all tomorrow for our next sessions. We've got deploying Harmony Core services on Linux and in containers, and then another session called The World Speaks JSON DU. So thanks again, everyone, for joining, and we will see you at the sessions tomorrow. Have a good day.
Cheers all. Thanks.